All right, good morning, everybody. What do we have, about 48 people on the line right now? I would like to first start with either a show of hands or either type in the chat box or a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Qualtrics? You have a couple of surveys that you've created, just enough to be dangerous, good K. Heard of it but not used it yet. Michelle, great, you've got one survey in there. Okay, so I just wanted to know where we were starting from. We have a lot of dangerous people on here. Heard of it but not used it yet. All right, so as employees of Ohio State University, we all have access to use Qualtrics, and we have a free version of that available to us. I want you to make sure that when you are using Qualtrics, that you don't just go out on Google and Google Qualtrics and set up a free account. If you do that, you will not be using the Ohio State iteration of Qualtrics. So make sure that you're always using the Ohio State iteration of Qualtrics. Now, another question I have for you, I looked up a lot of the people that were registered to come today. I'm just talking right now, Melissa. I'm not showing anything yet. Okay, so anyway, I looked up a lot of you online to see if you were standard users of Qualtrics, or if you just had the student level account. Because what happens when you get to the Qualtrics website and you use the Ohio State, when you're using the Ohio State iteration of Qualtrics, you're just signed up for a student free trial account. So there are some limitations that come with that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over here. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a few of our helpful links that we have for you today. The first being our Learning and Organizational Development website. There is a section on the LOD website that's devoted to online surveys. And then we have a Go link to get to Qualtrics, which is go.osu.edu/Qualtrics. Remember that Go links are case sensitive, so don't capitalize the Q. Although if you did, I think they've set it up so that you can get to it either way. Then Ohio State has also set up a blog through the brand administrators at the university here for Qualtrics, which is u.osu.edu/Qualtrics. And they generally post some frequently asked questions are answered on that blog, so it's a good resource for people. And then I also didn't want us to forget about the Office of Responsible Research Practices. So if you're conducting research using Qualtrics, you need to make sure that you have gone through that approval process, whether you're exempt research or you know, or you have to go through a full IRB review. And it's best to let the Office of Responsible Research Practices make that determination whether or not what you're doing on Qualtrics is research or if it's just program evaluation. A lot of cases in our county offices, we might be using Qualtrics as a registration method, or we might be using it to, sign up people in our 4-H clubs or to create a 4-H camp counselor application. So there's a lot of different things that we're using Qualtrics for that are not research. But you still should, if you think you might be doing research, like you're evaluating a program, you think it might not be research, but it might be research, just go ahead and check with the Office of Responsible Research Practices. So when you sign up, you are given that student trial account. You have to upgrade your account so that you can have the features available to you of the full standard account. And some of the features that are not available when you're a student trial account, you can only ask 20 questions. You can't ask any more than 20 questions. You also cannot distribute a survey with a student free trial. And then you can also not share a survey. As in you're working with another colleague either across the university or even within the college, you can't share a survey with someone if you are set up with a free student trial account. So you must upgrade that account. And the way you go about upgrading your accounts is to email me and let me know. I'm the division administrator for our college, and you just let me know that you need an account. Can you show me by the chat window or show of hands, how many people have an upgraded account? How many people think they have an upgraded account? Yeah, so if you don't think you have an upgraded account, you can go ahead and send me an email and I will walk you through the process of how to upgrade that account. I'm going to go ahead and show Qualtrics right now. I already have it open on my other browser here. Okay, I brought it into what I think I'm sharing. Can you see Qualtrics now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move my chat window so I can keep an eye on you guys. Okay, so here I've already logged in. And I'm actually logged in as a previous user of Qualtrics, someone that I know is no longer with the university, and I'm not going to upset her account. But I didn't want to log in because, as I mentioned, I'm the division administrator for our college, and I have different links available up here than you guys would. So once I send a upgrade code to use to upgrade your account, what you're going to do is go to the URL that I showed you before, which the Go link will take you to this URL. And you'll have to log in to using your Kuros username and password. And then if you need to upgrade your account, come over here to the little person icon you see over here on the right-hand side of my screen. I'm hovering over this little person in the circle. When you click on that, on account settings, and then you would click on upgrade account. And then the code that I would send you, it's a really long alphanumeric code, so I send it to you in email. It's best to ask me for that information in an email because otherwise it's really hard to tell you the code over the phone. And that way it helps me keep track of who's got upgraded accounts. So if you have not upgraded your account, then I cannot, as a division administrator, I can't get into Qualtrics, log in and help you with the survey unless you shared that survey with me. And as I mentioned before, you can't really do that. C is asking for my email address, which I have it on the last slide, but I'll just go ahead and stick it in the chat box because, you know, that's really helpful information when I'm asking you to email me, right? Once you put the code into this box, you just click on the upgrade account, and then your account will be upgraded. The problem is you won't really notice that it's been upgraded. You won't be able to see really a difference. So the first thing you should do is come over here and click on refresh account. And then the other thing you can do is completely log out of Qualtrics, get out of your browser, go back into the browser, log in again, and you should be able to then distribute your surveys using email addresses or add more than 20 questions. So that's how you upgrade your account. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about some of the question types that we have in Qualtrics. And before I get to all of the different question types we have, I want to make sure we talk about the difference between accessible and non-accessible questions. So the university, starting on January 1st, I believe, started following the guidelines for accessibility in that there are several different types of questions in Qualtrics that are not good for screen readers. So a person that's using a screen reader to take a survey would not be able to, for example, do a rank order question with drag and drop because it's just not possible with that screen reader. So I've listed up here on the screen. I know it's kind of a small text, but I wanted to have a slide where I just showed you the different types of questions that are accessible and the ones that are non-accessible. Now, the biggest one that we will probably feel in our college is this matrix style question, because you'll see in here, Likert is one of the options on here, and as extension users, at least, I know we ask a lot of Likert types of questions. That doesn't mean we can't ask Likert type questions anymore. It just means we have to adjust the way we're using the question type in Qualtrics to be able to ask that question online. So we would ask it in a multiple choice style instead of using a matrix style. And I can show you the difference between those two in a second. So the different types of accessible ones are, we can have descriptive text, we can do a multiple choice, and that could be either with radio buttons where there's a single answer response, or with multiple choice answers where it's a more like a checklist, a square box where you can check multiple items. And then a matrix style, there are some matrices that we're still allowed to use, like the text entry one, where they can type in a response. And text entry of all types, we're still allowed to use those. The side-by-side style of question, constant sum. There's a drill down, timing, meta effect. So these ones down here after text entry are probably not going to be used by a majority of us. This is a lot of like higher level types of questions that most of us can get away with using just our multiple choice and matrix and the text entry style. And then there's other types over here that we can't use. For example, I used to use a slider style question when I wanted to give people a break from this click here, clicking on radio buttons. I used to be able to use the slider style question where you could have one word on one end of the scale and one word on the other end of the scale. For example, agree to, or strongly agree to strongly disagree, and they could take a slider and move it back and forth across that and have a response. But we can't do that anymore because of the screen reader problems. And I've never been a fan of rank order questions anyway. They are really hard to analyze on the other end as a person that's trying to analyze. The other types of questions that are non-accessibles that we might be using, for example, I know that we have at least a few counselor applications out there that are utilizing the signature question type. So we're not allowed to use that one anymore. And then we also have some out there that have the file upload type, and we're not using that question type anymore either. Now, Danae is asking the question, do we know why that the file upload option is not accessible? I'm not really sure why the file upload would not be accessible. I know that they are talking, they being brand administrators for Qualtrics at the university are talking about you know, how we could continue to use that question type. And which brings me to my next point of, if you are doing current research involving any of these question types, non-accessible question types, there is a exemption process where you can go through, and I'm going to bring that over here, I hope. Let's see. So there is a process if you're doing research where you can request an exemption to use those question types. So it has to be existing research, but there is a survey, and I will share this link with you all in the chat box. And again, this is research. If you're doing research, then you can request the exemption. So I'm not sure what the questions are on that survey. It probably asks you some things like, how long has the research been going on? Why do you need to use a question type? And it gives you some examples of the questions you're going to be asked. Another thing that you can do, a lot of us are using, like I said, we're not using we're not using Qualtrics for research. We're just using it for either administration, or we're doing a program evaluation where we know our audience and we know that the people that we're sending our survey to are not going to be using screen readers. So in that case, you can send an email to Jay Johnson and request an exemption, or tell him the reason that you are using Qualtrics and why you would need to use that file upload feature, or why you would need to use that signature feature, and then ask him if it's possible for you to be able to access that question type. I haven't actually had to deal with any of these yet, but I would assume the process is something similar, where Jay would contact me as a division administrator for our college, and I would be able to turn on that question type for you. Or he would be able to do that if I'm not able to do that as a division administrator. He should be able to do that as a administrator. So Carol, that's a very good question. And I would call that purpose for using, so Carol's asking in the chat box, what if we use the upload type to upload pictures of livestock for registration? We can't do this anymore. That would be a case where I would email Jay and I would say, you know, here's what we're using Qualtrics for, and here's why we need that picture of that livestock, and why we would like to keep this all in one place in the survey, instead of sending out emails to people and asking them to submit a question via, or submit a photograph via email. Does that help answer your question? It's probably not the answer you really want to hear, but that's the way we're having to do it right now. Yeah, and Amy is asking about branching a survey and asking them if they need a screen reader. So that's actually a question I asked them back in October, the brand admins back in October. And I'm, second part of your question I'll get to in a second, but I asked if in the question itself, like before you got to the screen reader, or before you got to the actual file upload part of the question, if you could put in the stem of the question, if you have technical difficulties uploading a file, please contact, and then put the email address of the administrator for the survey, or the person managing the survey, or you know, somebody that they could contact for help. And they said that they were looking into that language, but that the legal team at Ohio State is going to have to get involved, because we don't want to get in trouble for any reason with the accessibility issues. And then the second part, I'm very concerned about not being able to use a matrix style question, because it does make the survey overall longer. Because one of the things with good web-based survey practice is to have your survey take up as little screen real estate as possible, so that a person isn't having to scroll to get through all the questions on a page, or even in a survey, if they have to click a lot. That's a lot of click-throughs. So it's nicer to have that matrix, because it takes up less room on the screen. And to demonstrate, I'm going to just go ahead and open this one up here. But if you were to after you get logged into Qualtrics, after you get your account upgraded, you can come over here and click on this create a project, and then it will let you create a project, a survey from scratch. But I already have a few of the question types in this survey up here at the top, so that's what I'm going to start with, since we're almost halfway through at this point. But I'm going to go ahead and click here. This is a survey that's kind of been created already. So you can see some question types in here that I already have set up. For example, this first one is a text entry question. You can see that it has address information here. And the way I set this up, a lot of people I will see set this up, like if they're asking for an address, they'll ask each of these in a separate question. which takes up a lot of real estate on your screen. So I like to do this as a text entry style question. You can see over here on the right-hand side of my screen, see where this green box is? I just clicked on the drop down for it. These are the question types available in Qualtrics. And see if they have not removed the inaccessible question types. So you need to be a good steward and just know that you're not supposed to be using these types unless you've asked for permission to use them. So over here, I've got a text entry style question, and I know what type of question it is because you can see how this is gray and the one below it is white. So the question that I'm on is highlighted with a slightly darker gray. So it's very subtle, but you can see it. So if I change this to a single line, it's going to get rid of all of these down here. So it'll get rid of country, state, city, address, and address to an address. So what I have selected here is a form style text entry, because I want them to be able to fill in a form, so they put all of this information in there at the same time. Now, if I think these boxes are too narrow, I can come over here and hover it just like any other thing where I'm working on the web. I can make these boxes wider. Okay. I don't really like that this country is up here at the top. It should be the last entry here. So I should be able to right click here. I've just right clicked on the word country, and then this little pop-up window opens, so I can move this down my list until it's at the bottom where I really think it should go. Likewise up here, state, I think this should be lower as well. So I'm going to go ahead and move this one down if I can. There we go. Move down to just above country, and then I'm going to go ahead and move city down too. Okay. What's missing here is a zip code. So I can add another one here. First, okay. First, I can show you that these have been edited over here. So if I have a zip code that I can add, I can change it so that the only thing they put in here is a number. So let me show you that. So if I'm here in country and I hit the enter key, it just automatically, so I hit enter or return on my keyboard, and it automatically lets me put another form field in here. So if I want to for example, ask for their email address, I can just add that in here. I'm going to hit the enter key again, so it gives me another one. I'm going to ask for zip code. I could ask for phone number, etc. So if I want to move this up to just below the state, I can do that, or just above the state now, just after. Okay. And then if I want to edit the type of information that can be put into these fields, I come down here to click up here to edit the form fields. And then I can, for example, the email address is asked for last. I can change the validation where I click on the drop down and they have to put a valid email address in there. So what it does is, as the person is submitting their responses, Qualtrics makes sure that there's like an @ symbol in that email address somewhere, or in that field somewhere. If they don't do that, then they're thrown an error message, and they have to fill it out correctly before they can move on in the survey. So also for zip code, there is a validation over here. So we can do validation. We can ask for a valid postal code and say this is a US postal code, because we know we don't have any international users of the survey. So you can, even in the form field type of text entry style question, you can still ask for validation so that they are entering the correct information. If you ask for phone number, you could tell it to say, a 10-digit phone number, just by clicking on that little validation thing over here. So if I'm asking for a phone number, it would say, I would select US phone number to make sure that they're giving us their full phone number. Usually on here, I would say phone number, I would say 10-digit phone number. So how do you fill in a box that stays there so it's provided information already? So Vicky, can you give me an example? I know you probably can't talk because you're probably muted. You don't have control over that. So, for example, I think I can think of an example. If someone is doing a registration process using chart fields, yes, we already have the account number for them. So what I would do in that case is don't even ask for the account number. I would just have that in a text display as either a separate question or I just wouldn't even ask the question. If I already know the answer is supposed to be, then I don't ask the question. So here is another question type. This one is called a text, just a display question. And you'll notice that my welcome to our survey is actually below my first question. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that you can also, you saw how I moved the order of these forms, the fields in the form question type. You can also move the order of your questions themselves. Just hover over that question once you have it selected, and a little arrow comes up over here. Now, if you have to move it really far, like say this was the very last question on our survey, you can come over here and click on the move question over on the right-hand side, and you can move it farther than just one. For this example, I only need to move it up one, so I'm just gonna go ahead and click on that button and move it up one. So another question type is the multiple choice. And this one happens to be using a radio button. You see how this is a round circle? This means that they only have one option. They can either select yes or they can select no. If you look down here on the next question that's on your screen, what meals did you eat? You'll see that these are square boxes. Those are check boxes, which mean multiple of these items can be selected. And we like to put a little hint in there, please check all that apply. Whereas this one, it's just a yes or no question that can only answer yes or no. So I will talk about this in just a second. This is a skip logic. So this is just a yes or no question. You can come over here and edit the number of choices that you have. Qualtrics can also be very helpful in recommending automatic choices. So it sees that this is a yes or no question. If I come over here and do automatic choices, and then I bump this up to, I want 3 choices instead of 2 choices. It's going to go add something there automatically for me because I have selected this automatic choices over here on the right hand side, and it's added a maybe for me. So those can be helpful and sometimes not. So if you click on the drop down next to this yes or no over in the automatic choices, you can see that they have a bunch of different options for their multiple choice options. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change that back to 2. So they either have to say yes or no. When you moved your question 4 up to the top, the next question was yes. So you've noticed that the question numbering is kind of odd, and I will show you how to fix that, Shelley. Generally, when I'm building a survey, especially if my survey has skip logic used in it, I don't print the question numbers on the screen, because what that does is kind of confuse people. So this says invalid skip logic right now, but anyway, so what that does is it can confuse people, because all of a sudden they'll be going along the survey and they're on question number 2, and if I haven't told them that they're going to skip to question number 5 if they respond in a certain way, then they're going to get confused when the next question says question number 5. So I tend to not put questions on the numbers on the screen. But I can show you how to renumber these questions very quickly without having to put any effort into it. So that was a multiple choice question with 2 options. and I showed you how you can increase the options over here on the right. So pretty much anytime you're clicked on your question, you will see over on the right-hand side the types of things that you can do to that question. So we can see if we can fix this, this invalid skip logic, but I'm going to do that in a minute. So here's a couple more examples. Here is an example of a multiple choice style question. And the way that we've asked this to display is using the horizontal format instead of the vertical. So if you look over here in the right-hand side, the position says horizontal instead of vertical. If I'm hovered over this question, I click on the vertical, you'll notice what it does to the question responses. It stacks them on top of each other. So generally, if we know that we have a lot of people responding to this question using their smartphones, it's generally better to use this style, the vertical style. But if we know that people are probably going to be sitting at their computers and we want to save screen space down the length of the screen, then you can go ahead and use that horizontal choice. And this is what I would recommend in place of our matrix style question. If we can't use that type of question, then this is what I would recommend. Let's see, there's another form one. Here's another question that's just a single question, that's a text entry. And this we can put a validation on. So it says, what is your age? If you want to put just a regular validation on a single choice question, you can do that as well. You just come over here and you say content validation, because we want this to be a number. So when I click on content validation, it opens up another menu over here on the right. It says content type. So we select a number because we want them to only put in a number. I would say max decimals in this case would probably be 0. We don't need to know if somebody is 10.3 years old. But anyway, I would probably just limit it to making sure that they're putting a number into that question. And then the last type here is a multiple choice question where there's a single answer response is the only available. Again, I'm over on the right hand side of my screen. I can see that there's a single answer. And me, as a person who has been doing online surveys for a very long time in my career, I know that just simply by looking at the shape of the button in front of the answer responses, the circle means that there's only one response available, a single response, a single answer. If I was to change this to multiple answer, you would see that they would change to squares with their checkboxes. So think of that as your daily to-do list. You can check off multiple items on your to-do list. So I think that's most of the accessible style questions that I wanted to show you. I will also show you like how you can, for example, if I wanted to add a question in between these two questions here, like in between what's here, Q3 and Q6, I can just click on the little plus symbol below. Like when I'm hovered over, you see the plus and the minus and the plus on the right-hand side. So if I wanted to add a question above this one, I would come over here and add on the plus symbol above it. If I wanted to add one below it, I just click on the plus symbol below it. Now the default question type is that multiple choice question. So if I want to change this question style, I just come over here and select the type of question that I want to add. If I want to delete this question, all I need to do is, first of all, make sure I really want to delete this question. But then all I have to do is click on this little minus sign over here and it will say, it'll remove your question. So what that does, when you remove the question, never fear if you didn't really mean to do that, come down here at the bottom of your survey and you can resurrect the question just by clicking here and say, I wanted to put this question back on my list, my survey, then I just click over here where it says on the right-hand side, restore. I can also permanently delete. If you're going through and deleting a lot of questions from your survey, then your trash can get full in your survey. Your web browser won't handle that as easily as it used to. Some of you might be more advanced users and you want to be able to use a skip logic. So did you eat any meals at this conference? So if they answer yes to this, I want them to tell me more about what they thought about the meals. Then I would make sure that the skip logic says, if they answered yes to this, they need to come down to Q11 um, and answer that question, or go to Q2 and answer that question. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit Skip Logic here. What I'm going to do here is if they say no, I'm going to tell them to go to the end of the survey or to the age. Okay, if no is selected, what is the age? That's the survey, the question they're going to skip to. Okay, so if I'm taking the survey and I said, did you eat any meals at the conference? And they said no, then it's going to take me to this question down here that says, what is your age? Okay, if they answer yes, then they're going to see all of the next questions until they get down to the age question. This is another question that's kind of randomly in here. As an example, I can show you how to delete that one. You just click on the delete. Okay, so that's how I edit a skip logic. Now, if I want to do a display logic, that would be a different type of thing. And sometimes you want to think about how the person is going to be responding to your questions. If you're going to have, for example, you want to ask married people one type of question or one set of questions, and you want to ask single people another set of questions. And our FCS people would be doing that. Our family consumer sciences people would be doing that type of thing. Then you can use that skip, either the skip logic or the display logic. And the display logic just kind of lets you display a question. A skip logic will skip over all of the questions until it gets to the next question that you said that the person should skip to. So here it's asking, what meals did I eat at the conference? This one is this is called a carry forward type of question. So if I wanted to, for example, if they selected breakfast, dinner, and snacks, I want to make sure that the next question because the next question is a ranked style question, I want to make sure that they're only ranking breakfast, dinner, and snacks, because it would not be valid for them to rank the other if they didn't even attend those. So this is called a carry forward type of question. So if I click on this carry forward edit, I can do the selected choices. These are the types of things I can do for a carry forward. So I want this to display only the things in the rank style question that they selected. And this will make more sense when I show you when I give you the preview of the survey. And then that applies to question number 2 here that says Q2, what meals did you eat at the conference? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that, but I just wanted to open that up for you and show you can edit those. And then this is a display question. So if they answered, what meals did you eat at the conference on day 1? Breakfast is selected, then they get to see this question that says, how satisfied were you with breakfast on day 1 of the conference? Okay, and then you could also apply a similar skip logic here, or display logic here. They only see this question if they click on the question that says, what meals did you eat at the conference? If this question up here was, we'd have to add another question because this says day 1 instead of day 2, but then we could display that question only if they answer a specific way. So some of the things up here that I want to show you because we're running out of time, but anyway, there's different things that you can control up here. So one of those things that I said I was going to show you was how to automatically renumber your questions. So that's pretty simple. You click on this little tools drop down and you can click on auto number questions, And I'm going to go ahead and select this just sequential numbering. And so you can see here, it renumbered all my questions into what makes sense for Qualtrics. Um, so that Q1, Q2 is showing. The other thing that I usually control on my survey are under survey options is if it's a multiple page survey, and when you're employing skip logic and display logic, it usually does turn into a multi-page survey automatically because it's taking you through different parts of the survey. I like to put a back button here. Because if I'm taking a survey and then all of a sudden I want to change my answer and I can't click on that back button to get to my previous responses, that can get very annoying for somebody that's taking your survey. But you want to make sure that you have those, even if you don't have any skip logic built in. Try not to put too many questions on a single page because it can get a little bit too long. So I like to keep like at most maybe 5 questions to a page. Here's where you can show the question numbers if you like. I usually like to use a progress bar instead of the question numbers because again, that helps when you're, especially if you're using skip logic and display logic in a question, a survey, online survey. Another thing that I like to do to increase my response rate is whenever possible, if I have the people's email addresses, I send to individual email addresses instead of just creating an open like URL where anybody in the world can take my survey. I like to use by invitation only. So I click here and then I create an email invitation. Um, I don't typically use the password protection. If I'm doing some type of voting or I only want one response per person, I click on this prevent ballot box stuffing. You need to be very careful with this because if you are, for example, doing an open access survey where people might be able to respond to it in their public library, what Qualtrics is doing is tracking that IP address. So if one person sits down at the public library and answers that survey, the next person that sits down and uses that same URL will not be able to get to the survey because it has told them the Qualtrics knows that that IP address has already responded. So I tend to not click on that unless I'm doing a ballot box, an actual voting system. Um, let's see, the other things I like to do in here, I usually keep on a default end of survey message, which basically says, thank you for taking the time to respond to the survey. The other thing I usually do is come down here and change this to like a month or 3 months from their last activity so that when I close a survey, I can still get those people that partially responded to a survey. I'm going to go ahead and click on save there. If I am working with someone, which I am doing this a lot, I work with a lot of people in our extension offices, and I want to send them a preview of the survey so they can test it for me and see if it's working properly. What I usually do is click on this little preview button here on the right-hand side. I'm hovering over. This opens it up in a different screen. You'll see that it shows me what it would look like on a regular computer. And then over here on the right, it also shows me that this is what it would look like on a phone. And up here new, as of last week, you can also click on this QR code and copy that QR code to put it on, so that you can use it, especially if you're just using like a general URL to access your survey. You can click on this QR code and take a screenshot of it. So, but if you look here, I haven't made any of my questions mandatory. But this is what I would do. I highlight this URL up here at the top, and then I would send that URL to whomever I'm asking to test the survey for me. Like if I'm doing something for Ken Martin, then I would send him this preview so he can click through the survey and make sure that it's functioning the way I think it should be. And it would tell that user that it is a preview link, that it's not, the responses are not being recorded. I did not set any of these questions up as mandatory, so we should be able to like just go through here. But remember, I set this up as a number. So if I try to type letters in it, it's going to let me. However, when I try to leave the screen, it should stop me. So did I eat any meals at the conference? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And when I click on this little arrow over here, I'm going to say, please enter a valid US postal code. You see what it did to me? And then it's going to say, please enter a valid email address. So that validation there helped us set up our survey correctly so that we make sure that we're not getting bogus email addresses and we're not getting, bogus zip codes. I'm going to go ahead and click on this little button over here, and I want to talk about that in a second for accessibility issues. And then you'll see that my back button over here on the bottom left-hand side has just shown up. So I can click on that and I can get back to my first page and change any of the answers that I might want to change. Then I need to click here. What meals did I have? Let's say I ate lunch. I'm going to go ahead and click on the next button. That should take us to that question. Remember, it said the rank, best of worst. Well, we only have one answer here. So we can only check one. I'm going to go ahead and check one more, this breakfast response, because I think that other question will show up now. So if I want to rank these, I'm going to go, okay, my breakfast was my least favorite meal, so lunch was the best, etc. So that's how you drag and drop. So that's why screen readers do not get along with these ranking style questions like this. So how satisfied was I with breakfast on the day one of the conference? I'm going to say somewhat dissatisfied. What meals did I eat on day 2, etc. So it's asking me what my age is. So if I try to type in something that's not a number, because I think we set that up, it's going to say, hey, enter a valid number here. Now, you can enter a number, you can set your validation so that they can't enter weird numbers like that. But it was a number, so it let me put it in there. So one of the things that I want to show you on the look and feel is another accessibility issue. So for look and feel, we have this just shows us the type of question or the type of template that our survey is set up on. We do have a CFAES one here now, so if you want to use that, you can go ahead and use that. I'm going to scroll down until I find it. Here it is right here. So if I use that, this is what it does. It changes my logo at the top. So now it's the CFAES branded survey. Notice right here, this little double arrow. If I want to change that so that it says next instead of that double arrow, because the screen reader will read that better, and come over here to these options. When I click on general, you'll see that the next button, it shows you what the buttons are displaying. So for screen readers, it's usually better if we have next and previous or next, if we change those. I also said that I wanted to use the progress bar instead of the question numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to say with text. You can see it shows 0 to 100%. If I do with verbose text, it's going to say survey completion across the top of my my slider bar. If you look over here in the middle of my screen where I'm circling with my mouse, I'm going to go ahead and click on save. So now when I look at the preview, it's going to look a little bit different. See, it's got our logo here, and it's got the survey completion across the top. None of these are mandatory questions, so I'm going to go ahead and click next. You need to be careful with question type because, well, it can get a little funky, or the template that you're using. But you can see that my next and previous buttons, instead of displaying the bird mouth, are displaying the actual words next and previous. So somebody asked a little bit earlier, if I'm using email addresses, yes, that's what I like to do is when I'm sending out my survey, send it to a specific email address. And the way that I keep track of that is in my contacts. So up here in the upper right-hand side, you'll see several different options. If I want to get back to my list of surveys, I click on project. If I want to see if who I have in my contacts, I click here under contacts. Then I can create a contact list, and I can do this by importing something. I go ahead and just say test. I'm going to browse for a file that I should be able to open up a, a set of, let's see. So here's a list in a CSV format. So I've done all the work in Excel, and I can just click on the open button and add that to the survey. But I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because I don't want to do that, but it's not letting me do that. So I'm going to hit open. What I usually do here is click on the example document. So I know the types of things that I'm supposed to be, asking for. And here's my example document. So I've just downloaded that Excel file. The main thing I want you to keep in mind is that when you're saving this, you need to do file save as, and you need to save it as a CSV. So it should export as a CSV or download as a CSV, which is a comma separated file, but make sure that when you're uploading it back up into your Qualtrics account that it does keep it as a CSV. Now the only drawback to having this, adding contacts, if you're sharing your survey with somebody, then they're not going to be able to see your contact list. So you're going to have to be in charge of the distribution of the survey. The other thing you can do is set up your email invitation. So for example, I have a lot of messages here in my messages library. If I want to look for my invitations, this is actually Kim's account. So, but anyway, so this is my RSVP for Ohio State's Night Out in Indianapolis. So I can open this up. I can see that I've used here a couple of different fill-in fields. So for example, I had everybody's first name and their email address. These are the types of things that you need to include in an email invitation. For example, you have to have the survey link. If you don't have the survey link in there, they can't take the survey. You also have to have, so we usually put it in here 2 different ways with the take the survey, and then there's a URL you can do. And I can put these in here by clicking on this little icon here to insert something. And then I can do the survey link. And then if you want to put more information, like click here to find out more information from somewhere else, make sure if you're putting a URL to go somewhere else that you reiterate the fact that they need to click on the survey link to respond to, like, for example, an RSVP, which is what this one is for. I usually end up putting a reminder of when it's due, when they need a response by. And then we also typically want to make sure that we tell them not to forward the email because it's coming from coming directly to them, and it's only to them. If they click on somebody else's survey link, then they're going to be responding for that other person. And that's how we keep track. We let Qualtrics keep track of who has responded and who hasn't responded. For this one, you also need to have, for your email invitation, it's not a valid email invitation until you put that opt-out link in. And this one, usually put them at the bottom because we want people to respond to our survey. And if they click on opt-out, then they're not going to get any more surveys from us. And it's typically what people will do is scroll all the way down to the bottom of a survey and click on the last link they see. That happens sometimes, and it can be the opt-out link. So I usually come in here and click on this little piped text, which is the A with the curly brackets around it, opt-out link, and then I'll just type in a space bar here. And then it takes away any of the text that is going to display on that screen. And then you would click on save. So if I go back to my messages or my survey library, I can, like, for example, send out this survey by clicking on distributions tab. I just did that a little quickly, so I'm going to go back here. So here's over here on the left hand side, there are several different options across the top. I can use the distributions link to send the survey out. Okay, I wanted to send this out by email, so I'm going to click here on compose email. So here I can select contacts, and anybody, as I add things to my add lists to my contacts section of my account, they will show up here. I'm going to go ahead and put that there. You can change this here. So if I'm sending this out for someone else, I might put, you know, that other person's name. And here it pretends that I'm, you know, somebody else. You can also change this survey link. So the from address is from a general URL or a general email address, so it doesn't go into their junk mail as quickly. So it's probably a little more advanced than I'm going to get into today because we only have a few minutes left. So, okay, so if I wanted to send this, I could just load my message from my library. So here's an example. I just clicked on that drop down. You can put your subject line in here. I usually put in response requested in all caps right before my subject line, so I can get people's attention. When I'm sending out a reminder, I'll type in reminder in all caps and then a colon, and I'll leave the original, you know, subject line. So the other thing you can do is send yourself a preview email by clicking on this button here. Be aware if you've used any of these fields like this, it will not display, for example, it won't display my first name if I'm using this in preview email. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is make sure that when you're sending out a survey to people, you're using your branded signature block at the bottom of that email. It makes it more of a chance that the person is going to respond to that survey because it's legit. It looks legit. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel on that. And that's probably the last thing I'm going to show you. But yes, when you send out a survey and you are collecting responses, you can also send out reminders. And I'll show you how I've done that before. See if it logs me back in as myself or as Kim. Yes, I can click over here and see that I'm myself again. So for example, my 4-H program review here. If I look at distributions, and then I click over here on emails, you can see how I kept track of, or Qualtrics kept track for me. When I sent out the survey, I sent a test out to myself first, then I sent the test out to a smaller group of people. And then I sent a very large group of people got this particular survey, 970 emails sent. And then I just came over here and clicked on schedule reminder, and I sent out a reminder for this. And if I want to click on view distribution here, it'll show me the email that was sent and the date and the time that it was sent as well. So it does a very good job. Qualtrics does a really good job of keeping track of that type of information for you. And we've gone over time, and I'm sorry. Are there any questions out there? I know this is a lot of information, but as Danae said earlier, she is recording it, so you can always like pause, rewind, stop, yell at the screen, email me, ask me if you have other questions. But I can be a resource for you.
Debbie, thank you so much. Vicky did have a question on, can you just add one single name into a saved contact list?
Yes, you can. Like for example, I have myself in as a test in my own account. So I will often send myself a test if I don't want to just send the test email, and I want to send the entire thing to myself so I can make sure that my my inserted type text like first name is working, or if I've inserted some other text like from an embedded field that I have in my contacts list. For example, if I kept track of what program area those people were in, then I can also show that in an email invitation. Angela, I don't have anything set up right now, but those links that I shared with you earlier are good information. Brian Butler is another person in the LOD unit, the Learning and Organizational Development unit, that is very helpful with Qualtrics surveys. And then of course, Danae, if you have questions, she can answer as well. And then I just wanted to give you those links again. So for example, the Ohio State Qualtrics blog, that u.osu.edu/Qualtrics, there is an FAQ page on that that will show you, that gives you answers to some of the frequently asked questions out there. For example, when you're distributing a survey, they've come up with a way to decrease the likelihood that it's going to end up in somebody's spam email by using a surveys.osu.edu as the last part of a no reply survey or email address, so that it's less likely to end up in somebody's spam. So there's a lot of different things like that. And I do walk through with people, like if you're having questions and problems, or you're trying to do something more advanced, because using skip logic and display logic is a really good idea when you have a complicated survey. It makes it a lot easier for the person taking that survey. It makes it a little harder for you to set it up, but you likely will get better responses if they're not having to read questions that are not relevant for them, the person that's taking that survey. And there's several different examples of that. But if you need more advanced help, which a lot of this stuff is more advanced help, then feel free to contact me and we can set up Zoom and I can walk with you through with you one-on-one. I think Vicky on the call today has can attest to, I can help at times to distribute a survey or to help figure out what you really need to be asking, etc.
Well, perfect. Again, Debbie, thank you so much for being on today and teaching us the basics of Qualtrics. A few people are saying that we need a more advanced training for Qualtrics, and that might be something we'll discuss in our LOD unit and do something maybe later this year.
Yeah, because there are some more advanced question types that you can get really in deep in the display logic versus the skip logic, using piped text to display in questions. So there's a lot of higher level, more advanced things that we can do with Qualtrics. And I didn't even touch on how you get the data out. So that's another thing that can be done.
And that's a big piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's just by clicking here on this data and analysis. But I'm not going to do that on this survey because I don't want you guys to see the responses. But if you click on that, you will be able to see the responses from, for example, this your program review survey.
Well,
Okay.
awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody has the assignment to log into your Qualtrics account and see if you have an upgraded account. And if not, you can email Debbie and she will get you that access code to upgrade your account. Thank you so much for being on. And we will continue to do these webinars. We have a whole webinar series that we're doing from our LOD unit this year. So stay tuned for registration and emails about those. And again, thank you to everyone.